had an idea, a goal, a vision, a change that you wanted to make, something you wanted to do, and it didn't happen because you couldn't get support. You couldn't get the people you needed to take the actions to do it. Probably we've all had that experience. And what we're going to talk about today is some tools that will help you get those people that you need support from, that you need to get on board and taking the actions you need them to take so you can get the results that you want to get. I want to thank Royce and Corey for having me, and I want to thank everybody for being here, those of you that are here live on the webcast, and also anybody who might be listening to this at a later point. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I know you have a lot of other things that you could be doing. I know the ice has everybody behind a few days, so I appreciate you being here. And here is my commitment to you, and that is to give you everything I can give you in the time we have together. And it really is my intention that you walk out of here saying, wow, I'm glad I came. It's my intention with all my audiences. I'm glad I came. I got something that I can use, and I am going to use, I am using immediately. What I'm going to ask of you is that you suspend judgment and really step into that place of listening with an open mind. Because my passion is helping people get results through taking the world and looking at it from new, unusual, and hopefully insightful perspectives. And the only way you can look at things differently is if you're open to doing so. I've been a student of leadership for the last 30 years. And it really started when I was in my MBA program. I was fascinated by anything that had to do with organizational development and culture. In my first job, after I got out of school, I was really lucky and fortunate that I had a boss who was not only a fabulous mentor, but also really understood leadership and helped me to learn leadership and the value that leadership brings to an organization, the value that an individual can bring to an organization when they're really focused, when they have great leadership skills. That first boss I had was a CEO of a psychiatric hospital, and he was a social worker by training. And one of the things that I've observed over the years is that social workers, counselors, people trained in the counseling fields, if they have a desire, and if they can set expectations, hold people accountable to those expectations, really make great leaders, because they've had training in an area that most of us haven't. In fact, for most of us, those interpersonal skills were either shoved under a rug, ignored, or given very little value. And during my first job as a very young manager, I had an opportunity to take a profile called a DISC profile. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a profile that looks at 4 behavioral quadrants. And that really, I credit with changing my career in several ways. The first is it really gave me some insights into some behaviors I had and some things that I did that were blind spots that were getting in the way not only of my success at the time, but they were getting in the way of my ability to advance. And the second thing it allowed me to do is it really allowed me to understand that other people perceive the world differently than I do, that we've all got different lenses on. And if I want people to support my initiatives, my issues, the things that I want, then I really have to understand how they see the world and meet them where they are. And I really credit DISC with saving my career early on, because I got sideways with the medical director of the hospital. And as you can imagine, you really don't want to get sideways with the medical director of a hospital, because if it comes to the medical director or it comes to the marketing director, which I was at the time, let me tell you who's going to win that battle. And it's not going to be the marketing director. So with the understanding that I had with DISC, with the leadership that I had from my boss, who was also my mentor, I was really able to understand and look at the medical director's perspective and bring him on board and get his approval for the marketing initiatives that I had. And without his approval, whether I agreed with him or not, whether I thought he was right or not, without him agreeing with the marketing initiatives that I wanted to put forward, we weren't going to go anywhere. So I really learned the value of getting support, and that we've all had instances, as we talked about at the beginning, instances where without support, our initiatives, what we want to do, what we're trying to accomplish, just doesn't happen. In later years, as I started doing training, one of the things I noticed in audiences, and some of you may have experienced this, hopefully not with me, but with other trainers and speakers, is that if I wasn't really careful, I'd get sideways with certain members in the audience, with certain participants. And what I realized was they were seeing the world from a very different perspective than I was. And if I wanted to get across to them, if I wanted them to really get insights, it was my job to meet them where they were. You can probably understand where I'm coming from, and really work with them. And then finally, more recently even in my consulting work, I was going in with a team of consultants, and we often recommended and often came back, probably 9 times out of 10, one of the biggest issues is leadership. You've got a leadership issue here. The problem was we weren't really telling our clients what that meant. And what does that mean, you've got a leadership issue? Yeah, your documentation isn't as good as it could be, and you've got these other things going on. But we really never tied that to the leadership issues. We never gave them any recommendations around that other than get rid of the person. You know, you may have been there where you've got somebody and things aren't just going right, and it seems like the easiest thing is to just get rid of them. So to get rid of them, and we never really told them if they got rid of that person, what to hire for. It was this ambiguous, undervalued term, leadership. And that really made me decide, we need to make this more real. I felt like we were kind of like, you may remember one of the Chief Justices said about hard pornography. I can't really define it, but I know it when I see it. I felt like that's what we were doing with our clients. We weren't defining leadership. We knew it when we saw it. We certainly knew when we didn't see leadership, and yet we weren't defining it. So that really led me to get a little bit more concrete, to come up with some more definitive skills around what is leadership and why is it valuable? Why should anybody care? And I developed what I call the value leadership model. Clearly, I'm not going to be able to go through the whole model. You'll be happy to know, because I know you want to get home sometime this evening. I'm not going to be able to go through that entire model tonight, but I will give you a piece of it. I'll at least tell you what the whole model is, all of the components of the model. You can experience a piece of it, and then I'll let you know how you can get more if that's something that you're interested in. So specifically, what we're going to cover is the first 2 components of the value leadership model. We're going to touch on 3 keys to getting others to support your vision, and really why that's important, why it matters if anybody else supports what you're wanting to do, and how you can more fully integrate this into your business, into your career, and really into your life, because it works in all areas. What I'd like you to do now, if you would, is just take a minute and think of a vision you have, a change that you want made in your business or your career, something you'd like to have different. So if everybody would just take a minute and jot that down. What is it? What's an initiative you'd like to implement? A goal that you have, something that you want to be different. And while you're doing that, I want to point out that leadership isn't about authority, it isn't about where you are in the totem pole. It's about having an idea of how things could be different and how things could be better, not just different, but better. And then really taking the initiative to get the support you need to make that happen. That's what leadership is. It could be in your company, it could be in an organization like Rotary or an association that you're involved in. So there's, regardless of what your title is, regardless of where you fall in an organizational chart, you're in a position to make change happen. And making change happen is what leadership is all about. When I talked to this group on October 22nd, you can go back and look at that video, it's available. I talked about vision, and that's the first component of the value leadership model. I'm just going to touch on it here just enough to put it into context, and you can go back and look at it more. But vision is the image or the picture of how you want something to be different, of what life will be like once you've achieved your goal or implemented the change that you want. And it's important because without a vision, you don't really know where to go. Without a vision, when barriers come up, when you encounter problems or issues, as you always will, that's when there's the opportunity to let your vision go or fall off the path. With a vision, and if it's a compelling vision, that's what keeps you going without relying totally on self-discipline and willpower. So it's a critical piece of leadership to know where you are and where you want to go that's different from where you are right now. When I work with clients, obviously this is a place that we start, and it's some place that we go very, very deep and into a lot of detail with. If you want to go into more detail with it on your own, some of you may have this already, but those of you who don't, I want to tell you how to get a worksheet that I have. It's a worksheet that steps you through the 8 steps of a compelling vision, and you can email me at jchance@strategiesbydesign.com. Let me tell you that URL. It's jchance@strategies, STRATEGIES hyphen by by-design, design.com. So tell me you want that worksheet and I'll send it to you. So the second component of the value model of leadership is alignment. And alignment is getting others on board with the changes you want. It's really getting the support you need to make a change, to achieve a goal, implement an initiative, and realize a vision. It's about buy-in, and ultimately it's about getting people excited about it. It's about getting others involved, and that's important because no matter what the vision, the goal, the change that you want to make, even if you could make it on your own, even if it was something you could do without the support of others, and most things you can't, it's going to be a whole lot easier, you're going to be a whole lot more successful if you get others involved and get their support. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Also, it really doesn't matter how strong your vision is. You can have this great vision and just have a change the world vision. And if you can't get other people on board, if you can't get them to buy in and support you, it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how great your plan is. You can have a perfect plan for execution, but if people don't implement that plan, it's not going to happen. So it really is the core, it's the piece between vision and execution that has to be in place if you want to get results. And the first time I really understood this, we understand things at a mentally, intellectually, we understand things, and then at some point we really get it. We get it in our bodies. The first time I ever got the fact that you had to have buy-in, you had to have support, you couldn't just order people to do things, is again when I was a young manager and my boss was putting together this meeting to get people on board with an idea that he had and to move forward. And I can tell you exactly where I was standing. I can remember everything about it except what the issue was. I don't remember what he was trying to accomplish. And I thought, why don't you just tell him? You're the boss, you're the CEO of this hospital. Why don't you just tell him what to do? And it was like, that just doesn't work. And it amazes me yet at how many people don't realize that just because they have a vision, just because they have an idea, that everybody doesn't automatically jump on board and do that with them. Just because they're excited about it, to realize that they have to bring people along. The other piece of vision is, just to back up for a minute, is we tend to think about these big world-changing visions when we use the word vision. In vision, there's a capital letter V, and then there's a small letter v. And so a vision is anything you want to be different. And they're not always rosy, or at least at the start, they're not always rosy. They've got some thorns to them often. Because oftentimes, the reason we have to change is because something's not going right. I'll give you an example of a not-for-profit that I'm involved with. And the executive director of this not-for-profit a couple of years ago started to realize that one of the programs really was becoming less and less viable. And she began to realize that this program was probably, if something didn't change, it was probably going to take the agency down. However, other people didn't necessarily share her vision. The founder didn't necessarily share it at that point. The board didn't share it. Funders didn't necessarily share it. So she really had to take a vision that had a change that needed to happen, that had some negative components to it. And she really had to get people on board with it, both that change had to happen and what at the other side, what could come out of it that would really be an actual benefit and a positive and a possibility for the agency. And I'll talk a little bit more about that example as we go through this, because it's a very good example of a vision, getting people on board, not everybody in agreement, and then moving forward. So there's 3 steps that we're just going to touch on to getting buy-in. And the first is you've got to know who your audience is. You've got to know who it is that you need on board with your idea. And it's probably several different people or different groups of people. You may need to get investors on board. You need to be able to get a board on board, your board of directors. Maybe your boss, your peers, it may be your employees. Almost in every instance, at some point, you've got to get your customers on board, right? Because if your customers aren't on board, ultimately, it doesn't matter what change you make, what vision you have. So I don't care if you're a solopreneur, you've got to get people to support your vision, even if it's only, and I say only tongue-in-cheek there, your customers. You've got to understand what they need, what each of those groups needs on a group basis, and you've also got to understand it on an individual basis, because we each have different needs, and we each react to change and to new ways of doing things differently. An example of a gentleman that I worked with for many years, very respected in the company, very talented, somebody the company wanted to keep. And every time the company reorganized, he threatened to resign. Now, this happened several times. This company reorganized quite regularly, and he would threaten to resign. And here's the thing, all it would have taken would have been working with him just a little bit around the change and what it meant, and giving him a little bit of time to get used to it, and there wouldn't have been the drama. He had a need for time to get used to change that other people didn't. And you as the boss, or you as the leader, the person with the vision, regardless of the role you're in, you've been thinking about it a long time. You have gotten used to the idea of what's going to happen. The people that you want to support you, you have to bring them along. So first is you've really got to know your audience, and you've got to know what their needs are on a group basis. Your investors' needs are going to be very different from your employees' needs, and on an individual basis. So here's a question for you. We're not going to answer it now, but who do you need support from for the idea, the initiative, whatever you wrote down or thought about when I asked you initially? Who do you need support from? What different groups, what different individuals, and what do they need to get on board? The second thing is you've got to have a clear, concise, and compelling message. Actually, you probably need several messages, one for each of those different groups that you need to get on board and to support you. The message has to be at a rational level, a logical level, and it has to be at an emotional level. You've got to appeal to people's heads, generally first, and then you appeal to their hearts. You've got to have both. And most of us, if you look back over what your messaging, you probably fall to one side or the other. You probably tend to have either an all rational message, that's the statistics, that's the facts, that's the logic, or you have an overly emotional level. That's the picture of the possibilities for the future, the probability that's on the negative side if you don't change. It's the stories that you tell and the testimonials. Those are the emotional pieces. And then your message has to speak to all the different personality styles. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but here's a way that will get you started. Make sure you talk about what. What is it that you're going to do? Make sure you talk about who. Who's going to be involved, and who is it going to impact? Talk about how you're going to do it. At least an overview of what the process is going to be, to the extent that you know it at this time, and talk about why. Oftentimes, if you will tell people why, and it doesn't even always have to be a good reason, they'll get on board with you. So you know from last time that I like language, and language is something I really like to pay attention to. Here's a word. When you tell somebody what you need them to do, or the change that you need them to make, or the vision that you have and what you want to do, use the word because. We need to do this because. If you do that, you can have a pretty lame reason afterwards, and it still makes an impact. There's a famous study that I just want to touch on. It's like some of you have heard of it, but a study of a researcher who, there was a long line of people making photocopies at the library on a college campus. So back in the days when people went to libraries and they made photocopies. Long line. She said, "Can I make a copy? I have 5 copies. Can I cut in front of you?" 60-some% said yes. So then she comes back, does the study at another time, says, same thing, except she says, because I'm in a hurry. Over 90% of the people let her cut in line. It's a lame reason, quite frankly. I'm sure they all had things to do, places they wanted to be. Because increases the likelihood that people will comply with what it is you're asking them to do. And here's a quick exercise, again, for you to do, and that is describe in 10 to 12 words or less where you are now, where you want to go. So 10 to 12 words or less, where you are now, where you want to go. 3 rational reasons that it's important, and 3 emotional reasons or stories as to why it's important. That'll get you started with your messaging. And then finally, I want to leave the third part of getting people on board is you must encourage and allow dialogue. This makes a lot of leaders, a lot of executives very uncomfortable. They've got a vision. They know the outcome they want. I was working with an executive director this week, and she said she knew I had given her a profile called a Work of Leaders profile that I use, and she knew that where she came up weak and agreed was on this dialogue piece. And she said, I'm scared. I know the outcome I want, and I'm afraid if I let too much information get out, it'll get out of control. And I said to her, you've got to trust your facilitation skills. And in the end, you're still the boss. That you can bring it back to where you want it and get the outcome you want, but you've got to let people ask their questions. You've got to let people vent and get their concerns out. That alone helps them to take action, even if they never agree, even if they don't like what you say. So here's...
It's a drill.
Okay. So...
It's not supposed to start till 6:30 though.
Okay, well we're gonna wrap up here. We've talked about the vision, and we've talked about the alignment components of the value model. As you may have guessed, this is the dealing with distractions, right? Good training. That's the V and the A of the value model: vision, alignment. Let me just give you the other 3. The L is leverage. You have to be able to leverage strengths, your staff's strengths, and your company's strengths. And guess what? To do that, you gotta know what they are. The U is unyielding belief in and commitment to whatever it is you're wanting to do, to that vision, to that change. When things go wrong, when there's bumps in the road, your staff, whoever you're wanting to support you, is going to look to you and see, do you still believe, are you still committed? Think about this. Have you ever been on a plane when there's some turbulence, it gets a little bit rough? I don't know if you're like me or not, but what I do is I look at the flight attendants. I look at the flight attendants to see what their reaction is. Now, I know they've been trained not to react, but it still gives me confidence to see that they stay calm. It's the same thing with your staff or with whomever you want to support you. And the E is you have to execute on a plan of action. That requires, obviously, that you have a plan of action, that you have a strategy, that you know what the critical issues are, that you know what the key initiatives are, that you set expectations of what happens, how it happens, and you hold people accountable.